Big marker here. Let's go live. Oh, we are joining right now. Everybody's joining. That's cool. Broadcasting. Cool. Thanks for joining. Really looking forward to this session and this conversation about how to plan your PI to integration shoot migrations. I have one here also, which just makes things a lot easier and a lot more fun. So yes, thank Wang for joining, and I hope you are at the right place here. We're gonna talk about migrations and what to do in here. And if you can hear us, click or write. We'd love to hear you're here and what you're looking forward to. Wang?
Thank you, Daniel. I'm glad to be here again. So looking forward for this.
Yes. So yeah, let's just get started. You're here on time. We are. We have a few things we want to talk about. Let's see how well we should get through all of these points. It's not that complicated. So the goal is here to plan how do you plan your migration. Then you need to, what is the times you need to consider in this thing. We would obviously talk about migration because that's what FIGAF is about, and then we will tell you how to get started. But a little about FIGAF. We started out creating software, I guess it's almost 7 years now ago, about how to automate it. We started out with a testing tool for migrations, and then we ended up, developing a lot of other features and functionality to improve the processing. The latest was a PI to CPI migration on the platform because we have everything in place. And that's, I guess, some of the things that we will be covering here. So, yeah, Juan?
Yes. So yeah, Juan Duque, for the ones that have not met me before, in one of the previous webinars. I am a consultant. I have had experience within integration for almost 21 years now. I'm part of a partner in a consultancy house in Copenhagen in Denmark called SAP PI, and we have been collaborating with Daniel the last almost 2 years. Is it that we have started to do some work together, work some projects together, and now we have started a tighter cooperation to actually try to blend all that experiences that we have and try to make Daniel's product also better and help us on delivering to our customers.
Yes, and I'm Daniel. I'm founder of FIGAF and have worked on these things. And yeah, I'm really glad we have this collaboration with Wang about being able to get some more insight about what is it that you see out in the field when you're dealing with these things. Because it's one thing to just mostly do software development versus really being out and bidding on these things. And Wang has just completed one assessment using some of the tool, and I guess that is part of the things that he will also be bringing here. I guess a short poll just before we get started, a little about where you are in this process. Where are you planning to do the migration, and what's going on? I will just come with a disclaimer. We will not guarantee anything about your estimates or anything like that. It is all up to you, just so we get that clear. But let's get started.
Hopefully we get enough information for you to be responsible about your estimates, right? I think that's one of the key messages, like,
yes,
you're responsible, but let's help you to feel that you are responsible.
Yes. And yeah, it's just, we're providing some information. You cannot just come up with 5 hours per integration and then multiply it, and then you got your number. Cool. And I guess the result of the survey is also there are a lot of people here are planning and still considering what to do in a migration. And I guess then this would be of interesting information. We will be talking about estimating is obviously a hard challenge, and especially for something that is a little bit vague and you have not done too many times. in that specific content with those scenarios. So I guess you'd always be wrong, no matter what you're doing. And I guess there's also a little difference in some of the talks that we have, whether or not you're an internal consultant or integration owner, or you are a consulting company that are dealing with these things. We started out creating this assessment tool, and we'll be talking more about this. Here we created a tool that allows you to actually create an assessment, and this takes like 30 minutes to get done. You also made it in that time, right, Ryan? On this
Yeah. So just a little bit of a background of what we did. We already use Figa for testing of CPI primarily. So I was very keen to get for one of our customers uh, to compare the assessment and how much it will help me to the estimation that I will do versus our traditional process of just extracting data of the systems. And well, one of the limitations that we had is that we're running FIGAP in a virtual machine, and that machine didn't have access to PI. But it was so quickly for me to just download the newest version, put it in my laptop. My laptop is in the network of the customer, get the access to their PI systems, and get the data out. Right. So it really was a good experience. It worked pretty fast, and the amount of data you will show it, but I think it correlates things very nicely from the start. Um, Things that we would have spent a couple of hours to try to merge data from different sources.
Yep. Michael, will you put this link in the chat so you can see this? Yes. Oh, you can see that link here. We don't want to start the video. So this is the Excel sheet. I think we'll get more into details about it later. The idea is that we get all of the artifacts. We got the sender receiver communication channel. We got the operation mappings. We got the splits that you have in the scenario. We have function libraries because we know that's a challenge with the SAP migration tool, and I guess also to some extent with our migration tool. There, you can click at the pop-up, then you should be able to get to it and sign up and see the different things that is going on with this. I guess I could also recommend this, that if you just want to understand your PI landscapes a little better, we're just trying to provide as much information as possible in this one. I think the last release we added information about RFC lookups, those kind of things. SAP also have an assessment as a part of their migration, or the migration capability that you will get in your integration suite system at some point in time. Well, I guess they said in January, which is pretty soon. So it will be interesting to see, and I guess I would recommend you check out both and see which one gives the best data and what you can use it for. As I understand, theirs would only support 7.5, and I guess that is where we can give you some more details on it. They have a way to give you some estimates of these things, but I'm not sure of what that estimate really contains and how useful it will be. Did you see that data, Wang? Or?
Yes, actually, we were shown by SAP as part of the beta, and what is interesting from the tool is that it's embedded within your integration suite, right? So it's very easy to access. And I think that they have had some nice eye candy in terms of graphs and some nice colors and everything. I was very surprised that they're actually there to estimate it for you, right? They ask you for a couple of parameters and they say, okay, so you have 500 interfaces and 7 hours per interface. Then what is the equivalent?
Yes, you need to have really good data and know everything is going on before you can do these things. And then I guess they say whether or not you should re-implement, and I'm not sure what they base these things on. But
we're going to talk definitely more about estimation because I think that's one of the keys of it. So they probably have data with input from a specific set of team. When I do estimation, I know my teams that are going to deliver on it. So it is important that you trust what is it the resources that you have to deliver such estimation, and how do you conclude
Yeah.
those numbers, right? And
Yes.
I will say that estimating on a per interface and then multiplying number of interfaces is always more risky and more uncertain that actually make a complete picture of a risk profile for the whole landscape and then estimate the program rather than a specific aggregation of one estimate to the other. It's different approach, but let's see. We'll talk a little bit more when we
Yeah.
see.
Did you get answer on the data that was coming into it? The report, I think you're getting the link that should have popped up also. Um, yes,
The which one? Sorry.
it's just some questions. I guess as a part of this, one of the things you want to do is obviously you want to define the architecture. And I guess that was also part of the things that you went into as a part of the last assessment you were doing, right?
Correct. I think that um, on terms of the we are clear about what's going to happen, and I think this is interesting for many customers that not everybody has maybe integration suite as the direct target of all your migrations. SAP PO was a very rich, mature system. So many times, some of those integrations that you had in there maybe qualify into more data integration or a API integration. So I think that we always want to start there, right? Looking at what is the new landscape that you foreseen to have. Some customers have distributed into new different middlewares, like taking a best of breed or so it's important to know where are you going to target it, and then based on that, try to find the correct grouping and categorizations for your new architecture. Right? I think that will also help you to build the kind of resource team that you will probably need, and it is important that you will have some benchmarks upon what is your delivery velocity in those teams.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, I guess one short poll also like to hear a little about your what is actually holding you back from doing the migration at the moment. We've added a few things. I think you should be able to answer multiple of these ones, and then let's just continue. And I guess that's this probably points into some of these things that you should actually, as a part of the estimation, try to perform some example migration. Take some of the content that you have and say, okay, let's try to migrate it and see, does this really work out with what you want to achieve. So first define the architecture, then define or try to see, does this come up with these ideas that you have for these things.
yeah. A good, I will say, a good recommendation is that if you're going to migrate and if you already are in the roadmap and have your budgets and plans approved, try to move fast into getting your integration suite landscape running and with operational interface on it, right? Not necessarily migrated interfaces, but interfaces running of it, because it's gonna be very challenging if you start migrating and at the same time building your new processes of operating integration suite and learning it at the same time. Many cases, the type of integrations that we have built in SAP PO, when you migrate requirements linearly, will not have resulted the same uh, flow or logic of the data. So it's important for you to be familiar with what the platform do, get confidence in the teams of how things should look. What is it that a good interface actually is supposed to be done? Because there will be a lot of benchmarking through a migration process. There will be a lot of evaluation of the design, like this is the design, this is what this interface is supposed to do, and we have what the interface is supposed to do out of a business requirement. And in SAP PO specifically, we have a lot of technical requirements, right? We have scenarios where we needed to add UDFs that do a little bit, for example, OData to fetch tokens, right? Many different ways to fetch tokens in in SAP PO. Now that they have the REST adapter, it's much easier, but there's so many of those little tricks, maybe an adapter module, maybe an interface in the middle UDF to fetch tokens, or orchestrations that will go one after another. And when you're going to move into CPI, now it's an orchestration landscape, right? It's not a transactional item. So sometimes you will face questions like this interface, do we really migrate it, or maybe it's worth it to redesign it to work within the framework that integration suite actually provides you for?
And then obviously also the other areas of it, the testing, deployment, these kind of things. And yeah, I guess that again ties into the architecture that we want to deploy. So thanks on the Q&A. It seems like it is a number of users, the budget is not available and it is early in the process, and some of the lacking features of the integration suite. So yeah, I guess these are a little on what we somehow had expected. I think this is also an important part of it, this the testing, and I guess this was why we went with a partnership with SAP on these things. Yeah, Gartner estimated that 60% is spent on testing, and I think, yeah, that's probably correct. We had a talk about this, about giving developers access to test earlier in the process, right, Juan?
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons, there's two reasons why testing effort takes so much, right? I think that we come from architecture and system engineering culture in which we do a very linear unit testing, system integration testing, validation testing in the regulated industries, for example, validating the interfaces. So that also pushes that maybe a lot of the technical functionality is tested by the developers as we do the building up. um, our unit test cases might cover technical functionality of the interfaces, but not really data related peculiarities of the scenarios. And very often those results come too late in a traditional uh, cascading program, right? So I think that's where everybody's aiming right now, to try to get those tests, functional tests and functional tested scenarios, as fast as possible back to the developers. So I don't want to hear the results that the interface is not working, or, or 2 months later, right? I have
Yeah, because
forgotten if
then you
I
have
would be
made
there.
50 other interfaces and you need to course correct all of these 50 interfaces.
Exactly, and I think closing those loops, making shorter what is called feedback loops, is essential for continuity of the program. And a migration project has all the elements to reach to a high level of automation, right? Because you have all possible scenarios in your productive environment, and it's a question about building your test cases out of those scenarios, right? So make it a test-driven migration project. I think that's a very big asset for these projects.
Yeah. And Jitez asked whether or not he should, or you needed to migrate everything, or you should migrate some and leave the on-premise to PO. So, yeah, what's your take on that?
So I will say this: SAP PO has a level of maturity that few platforms in the market have, right? And probably your operation teams have a very, very, very experienced level of supporting the business of what they need, right? So we have seen a lot of ways of extracting data. So when an interface comes and fails, how do you get this data that these people need on the business itself, right? So that's definitely a big we call an organizational challenge there. How are you going to change your processes when you go into cloud-driven architecture itself? So I will say that in a very conservative, I'm saying, like, take it at a slow pace. You still have until 2027, so it will
2030.
be all right. It will be fine. If you're in a regulated industry, then you are in trouble, right? You need to be ready before before that happens. But in a more enterprise level, I was like, maybe you can take pace. But I heard a really good argument from some enterprise architects a couple of months ago, And the main one is that now a lot of the companies are in S4 HANA upgrade or migration programs, right? And one of the experiences, and I think it's a very valid comment, is that you don't want to start a program and the moment that you hit a technical wall on your program and you ask for help for SAP to tell you, oh, your PO system is too old, you need to upgrade it before we can give you support, or your PI is no longer supported, right? So one of the fears that they have is that in the aggressivity of the roadmap of the S4 HANA, how aggressive they want to be, they don't want to end up and then suddenly have um, um, a set of architecture behind it, particular SAP PO, with a high risk of running out of support, right?
Mm.
Or especially not maximizing the benefits that SAP tries to sell you on terms that of the AP, the whole API layer of S4 HANA, all the reusable assets, all the main what's good they call the one domain of a data. So there's a lot of things that you could injure yourself if you really take it very slow and wait until
Mm.
2025, 2026, 2027 to start this program. So I was pleasantly surprised that a lot of customers have started to effectively do the migrations and ask for what do we need to do, right? Maybe it comes from previous experiences, right? Maybe the previous migration project went too long, too expensive, and they don't want to hit those problems before.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, definitely makes sense. Consider do not maybe not migrate everything. Migrate the things that make sense now. Understand how it works, and then in 1, 2, 3 years migrate some more or all the rest.
And it's so cheap right now, right? So technically, you don't need any budgeting. You just need your manager to say to you like, okay, don't worry, I'm gonna set up me myself a free tier. Put your credit card there. It's not gonna cost you anything to get a CPI system running. It's not gonna cost you anything to get Figma set up. You can run it on your net. So the cost of actually make a good proof of value, not even a proof of concept, but a proof of value, is actually very small, right?
Mm.
And even if you have done that in a test environment on your own laptop and in free tiers, all the assets that you produce are reusable, right? You take backup of everything, and when you restart a program, you have a starting line. So it's so easy right now to actually get this running.
So now we get to the slides you created. Well, let me show it here.
Yes. So when we do estimation about this, so I come from a long history of being part of consultancy houses and customer side. So there's definitely a different way of estimating from side to side, right? On the customer side, they are very they want to know how much it is going to cost, not only on the external cost but also internally, right? How many people do I need to actually run such program, right? So for that kind of estimation, you definitely need some people that have done this before, right? On the consultancy side, then is a many times is a commercial item, right? Some salespeople, or when it's a big consultancy house, some salespeople will bring the leads and ask the architects to estimate it, and then it comes a very awkward conversation of costing and like they ask breakdowns for the hours and many times start negotiating. Oh, that's too many hours. And I think the first thing that I want to say is that it's important to find your metric for what is it that you're going to price in terms of costing. What is it that is going to drive your effort, whether it's internal or external, right? It is not about the number of hours. I will say that that you should negotiate. It should be about the complexity and the commercial cost of it, right? I think it's not fair to push to your developer teams. That's too many hours. You have to do it in less. It, it's easier to tell like don't negotiate hours, negotiate pricing, right? So that's an advice to all the customers out there. When I come to with an estimate, or anybody comes with an estimate, don't ask me to deliver less hours. Ask me to change my commercial terms, right? Maybe that's a better case of it. But once you find your aim metric, for example, an interface count, be very clear what is an interface count. It's going to be very different what the assets in interface count you consider in SAP PO to a CPI, right? The interfaces, it is not going to be a one-to-one 600 ICOs, 600 integration flows, right? Things will change in the process. And to be honest, it doesn't matter whether you take one or the other. You just have to be clear what is it that you're counting as an asset, as your metric for influencing that estimate itself. Then you move into calculating the effort, right? And here there's tons of methodology, right? As you said yourself, Daniel, you classify easy, complex, medium. You say that the easy are 3 hours, the complex are 16 hours, very complex are 20 hours, and then you just start adding out depending by the number of interfaces that it has, right? I think that's if you manage to achieve a good level of categorization to begin with, that could actually work quite well. Some things that you have to consider is in that very quick estimation, there's a lot of inaccuracy, right? Not all simple interfaces will take you 4 hours. Some of them might take you 30 minutes. Some of them might take you 20 hours, right? So there's definitely a variation on that approach and how do you come to those numbers. So that's why I said that starting a negotiation out of those numbers sometimes is counterproductive both to the customer and the supplier if it's so you find an effort. What brings input for the effort? There's definitely the type of design patterns, whether it is A to A, B to B, because there's complex items not on the technical solution, but also about the change that your systems or partners communicating to it might have to do as well. Also complexities like things that it's not easy to see from just looking at the message monitoring. Some things that you have to dig into the message mapping and find out if there's UDS, find adapter modules, find sync async bridge patterns, like things that could actually put a different level of complexity, right? And then it comes an aspect on risk, because depending on how many complex interfaces you have, you also want to correlate with that with the statistics on how the production systems are running. If you have a lot of issues on some interfaces that might be very simple, then there's something wrong about that categorization, right? Or if you want to find out where there's a lot of volume, where there's a lot of issues in your program, and consider that to kind of bring a category or a risk profile to your full landscape, right? Sometimes message sizings will be interesting for architecture or for licensing impact. So that will be also interesting to know. So those are all the factors that we use into trying to build an estimate itself.
Yeah, I
One,
guess if you have the file transport internally, that is obviously something you should
yeah.
consider whether or not you want to send it via cloud or integration suite.
And
Yeah.
I can give you some taps in the back, Daniel. In the last exercise that we did, the assessment, all the Excel spreadsheet that the FIGAP tool produces. I love Excel, right? I I put it in Excel and I start pivoting around it. It helped me a lot to find those categorization groups and merge it with the statistics to produce not only a good categorization of the categorization groups, but also this helped me to actually start making work groups of the interfaces. So I was able to categorize like these interfaces with these characteristics. So if you're talking about agile delivery, I started making epics about interfaces of these characteristics.
Okay.
So interfaces that are file to file interface, like things that actually I can start planning into a breakdown of the project, how it could possibly be achieved, right? So that was quite efficient. I even uploaded that. I don't know if I ever sent you a screenshot, but I loaded the report to BTP Analytics Cloud. I got stuck because I'm not an analytics cloud expert. So then I jumped back to Excel, but I was quite excited to getting on analytics cloud.
Yeah, I guess another thing here, and I guess this is also whether or not the correct approach is to migrate or to redesign the process. And I think that also right depends about what scenario you want. I think the best approach, if you had unlimited time, would obviously be to redevelop everything so it matched for a cloud first strategy.
Mhm.
But I think you need to be pragmatic and figure out which of the what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Let's continue here on this one. This one is also an interesting one.
Yeah. So I wanted to show some examples, some visual examples on how general estimation comes in, right? So the first two charts where you see the two bars, that's a very simple categorization of the traditional, right? Pass through, simple interface, normal interfaces, complex interfaces, and very complex interfaces. Um, the two different graphs I try to illustrate two different customers, right? Or two different patterns that I see, right? If the customer has a very high stability on the system, if they have follow good practices, if they don't have too many, have not had many requirements of orchestrations, specifically like CCBPMs, BPMs, generally the chart on the left is what we often see, right? That most of the interfaces are normal complexity. There is a significant amount of simple interfaces, and complex, what qualifies as that complex, it can be either there's Java mappings or UDF mappings or some adapter modules in between, right? Generally, very complex interfaces are when you have CCBPMs or BPMs, or you have those where you have orchestrated yourself between multiple interfaces. So one interface calls the other interface, and the other interface calls the other interfaces, and async bridges in between. So that's generally what I have seen of this, right? But regardless whether it's a very stable customer or might be a customer with more complexity, the complexity curve shifts a little bit wider to the right. And what that helps me is to actually try to look into what I said, the risk, right? What is the kind of contingency that I will have? I want to everybody to notice that until now I have not talked about automation or optimization. I generally start with estimation in a plane as if we would have done it manually itself, right? Just to put a context on how it will be done. A second part is that the more experience you have, the better gut feeling you will have of an estimate over time. It will be easier for you to make a estimate. So many times I shift when the customers start asking, can you break down that estimate and we can see the different groups and what is a complex interface? It is dangerous to start putting more and more time on actually tailoring the interface, your estimate, and looking in more details preemptively on the system, rather than look about your whole complete delivery strategy. So if you know your team skill level, if you trust your architecture, you can probably build a burn down of how the migration could run. So the chart below, it tries to show it like it's a little bit over 300 interfaces that we need to migrate, right? So I know the velocity that my team will have, right? That's the blue line. And I know that it will take some time to get that velocity that we want to achieve until all the processes are set in place. We get that continuity in the team. And I also want to benchmark within that velocity, how much of it can probably be what will be our target of automation, whether on the migration or on the test side, right? This is just an example, and something that you can notice here, that here my ambitions for my automated migration were very not that high. I would say that it's very high view. 80 interfaces every month that you that you that you can automate. It
We need to improve that, I guess.
it depends on the volumes that you have, right? It's different the percentages if you have 1,000 interfaces in your last game that if you have 80, right? If you have 80 interfaces, probably not your percentages will represent much less, right? But if you're looking into 200, 300, 400 interfaces and you're able to migrate 40% of it, 50% of it, is actually a significant amount of work that you could save, right? And in my breakdown, I try to find the calendar time on how long it can take. Then I start looking into my resources that I will need for this. I consider things like working days and vacation and illness, things that I know by statistically how much delivery I can put. And then I know exactly that, or maybe not exactly, but to a very good stomach feeling that it will take me 18 months to migrate this, right? And then I can estimate and give a cost profile out of the 18 months of work, right? That's the, and we had an exercise with a project last year in which I was asked to validate an estimate from a delivery team in offshore, and the delivery team was quite good. They made a very granular estimate, and I made my own high level estimate in 2 hours. And the number that we got between the two teams had a difference of 60 hours, right? So that is a quite good starting point for your
At
methodology.
least you have the same assumption, yes.
Yeah.
And
So that
I can see that you're planning here that the team can take off for next summer, but not this summer.
it's more than it's 2 years, I think it is. So there's some. One of them is a summer vacation, then the other one is a Christmas vacation, then the other one is a summer vacation, right?
Yes.
So that was
So,
interesting on this side.
but I guess the idea about having the understand how much it will take, the effort, and then
Yeah,
how to deal with these things.
yeah.
And let's take
So
that.
until that point, I still have a delivery capability out of manual context, or at least out of what tools we're going to use for the migration, right? Then it comes the automation that I think is a very big factor in all projects right now, right? So I try to split in different groups. This is like an example of a breakdown of the different segments of a delivery project. As you can see, the technical work is in migration only, then there's testing, documentation. I think that every segment of your project will have some possibility to automate itself. As you can see there, we have a 10% of the documentation that maybe, sorry, 10% of the work that we have in the project is the documentation, but documentation has a very, very high probability of automation. All right. So I try to, in each of them, identify the effort, identify what's my automation target, what will be an ideal, how much of it do you think we can do automatically? For example, here in migration is a 55% that we could automate. That will be, I would think, exceptionally good from my perspective, for my team. Developer and unit test, very high automation. System integration, end-to-end testing, right? I have something against end-to-end testing, right? I think that control scope testing and with virtualized system, mocking services definitely gives you a better time of the quality of what you get of an end-to-end testing probably improves. But I have a very high chance of automation there if I know that I can actually use the mocking and virtualization of services, for example. Right? Functional
So this
verification.
is the breakdown of the product. You estimate that 30% of the work is required for the migration.
So this is just a step before the breakdown, right?
Okay.
Because right now I have an estimation, and then I take a look at what will be
How
uh,
much time you're spending in each area?
exactly, and what would be my target of automation in each of them, right? Because automation takes an effort, right? There's no question around it. And one of the biggest risks that you have in automation is that you start using more time automating rather than doing manual things, right? I think that's a big challenge that people have, right? If you
Yeah.
want to automate, many people ask, okay, we're gonna do automated testing. Which RPA tool should we buy, right? I don't think that's the right question. I think that if you want to buy an RPA tool or an automated test tool or a DevOps tool or start doing pipelines, you need to know how are we going to use this, right? What is it that we need to set in advance in our processes, in our development to actually achieve results out of a tool, right? So a tool will not solve your automation. So that's what I'm trying to target here, that out of these segments, what can we do right now with the tools that the customer have, I have, and the skill that we have, or automating certain items, right?
Mhm. Okay.
And that gives me, oh, so it went away, I think. I came back, good. That gives me a potential of us automation of savings on each of the elements, right? So migration. technical migration, there's a 17% potential. The system integration and between developer to system integration, there's more than 25% savings potential, right? So there's different areas how I can save. So generally, in this example, I get to a result that 41% of the effort that we have could be automated, right? It's very, I would say that this project for me is very ambitious, but it puts me also in a good starting point. But say, okay, if my potential of automation is 41%, if I use 20% of my time in actually executing the automation, like configuring the tools and actually building those automation in a correct way, then I still have a potential real budget savings of 20% over the whole project, right? So in percentage, it doesn't look too much, but if this is a project that you have estimated is going to take 14,000 hours, it is substantially. So 14,000 hours, 16,000 hours, that it's not weird for a migration process and a project on a fully deployed integration landscape, right? In a normal size, so that's not even a big size, right? So I have seen migration projects before that take anything between 2,000 hours to 25,000 hours, right? So the potential of automation can represent big savings on your program, and it could be the business case to actually invest on those processes, invest on getting those automation in place for your project.
Yeah, good. So let's get back. Oh. So I guess this was my just trying to bullet up all of these different things, and I think you already know here there's a lot of things that you need to put into it, and it depends a lot also on your organization. Just a short poll. If you are taking one of the simple or normal interfaces that you know of, what would you estimate all of these different tasks would take for your organization or the project you're considering, just so we have some ideas of where this time lies. You're probably not going to be right about it, but at least you have some idea about it. And if you can see that there is an opportunity to save a few hours or 20% or whatever, you have some idea about what this will give for your migration once you multiply it with the number of integrations. And yeah, we talk about optimizing process. This is all about figuring out what are the different areas that you can improve on in this. And yeah, it is a labor-intensive process, as you said, 2,000 to 25,000 hours, depending on scope, landscape, etc. It is, and yeah, if you can save 20% with automation, it makes sense to see what these items is. And obviously, we have one of the tools that enables you to give a lot of these things. I'm not sure we'll be able to go through a full demo, but you will see. I'll send you a video tomorrow or in the recap video about what is it that the tool can do end to end, so you have some idea about what the FigAff tool can do in terms of giving you a way to manage the project, giving you migrating integration content, transporting content, testing, governance, all these things that really takes a lot of time, and especially if you're in a regulated industry. Yeah, there's a free trial you can try out and see how it works also. And yeah, the easier, the faster you can test, the faster developers can get feedback and see what's going on. So I guess thanks for the poll. So about 18% said that it was 4 to 10 hours per interface. So that's some interesting statistics. We have some above the 11 hours. So thanks for replying. Um, yeah, I guess that was a little about what we already covered. Here is just an example of the dashboard, but maybe I should just show you the estimation report I just created earlier.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's all different kinds of ways that you can analyze this, and then this is just a simple way that shows you also receiver determinations, what kind of modules is. There was a question also file content conversion. That is still a problem. I think it's one of the it's on our to-do list on how to automate these things, but with this you can see where something like that happens. Called file CSV here. We can see the RFC lookups, receiver modules. If you have, UDFs in it, and out here we also have the processing statistics that we know that there has been processed a number of messages on this interface. And then you can take this, analyze it, slice and dice it, as we talked about. You can put it into an analytics tool and get some metrics that you can use to go out and say, okay, we have some CSV, we have some of these scenarios, we need to find out how to deal with these specific things. Yeah, just a little. I'll not give you the full detail. So here we have the FGAF tool. It's a standalone Java application for a proof of concept. You can deploy it on your laptop, PC, to see connected to your PI system, connected to your CPI system, and then you simply just go into the overview here. Here we have, and this is the project management part of it. Probably will also be improving this over time to make it a little easier to manage the project and give you the insights that you want. But what we can see right now is that you can see we have this integration. We can easily record messages from our PI system. We can go in and we can migrate the test cases. So we can take a test case and migrate that to CPI. If we wanted to do a migration of an iFlow, we simply just go in and write the name of the iFlow, 23.1.17. We can check, I guess it was 18. Anyway. So we can see the mappings of communication channels. We can see some of the problems that occurs. We simply just click migrate, and this will then migrate this with all the receivers, routings, etc. that you have in the tool. And then, yeah, you get UDFs, you get some of these different things. All of this is CGI, computer-generated iFlows. So we have an opportunity to improve this iFlow, make it better and more determined based on your specific scenario. So this is one of the ways we are trying to automate it. And then you can test it and use the tool also for transport afterwards.
You forgot to show the preview. I love the preview feature because
the one here where you can see it inside of the tool and see what's going on.
This allows you to say what mess is going to come out, right? To evaluate, does this help me, right?
Yeah.
I think that this is an important part of the process of the migration, that you actually can foresee how will this flow look, what does it look, and you can evaluate with if this fulfills the functional requirements that my flow, that my integration in PO had, and actually move forward with it. Right?
Yeah. And then
definitely not all migrations will end up in the same result, right? Not all of them might end up in the result that you want.
Yes. Right? Yes. And yeah, based on license, you can use the preview. You can see what works. If you click on the migrate, you will then pay for a license for this specific object. And then once we have migrated, we can see here in our list that we do not have test cases if I just migrate a test case to it, just to show you that it's possible, we can add it to a test suite. We can go in here and we can specify where we want to pick out this message, the resulting message. So even if you are using SAP or some other tool to it, you can say, if we have this input message that we fetch from the PI system, where should this go into? And let's see here, it will migrate it, we can test it, and we can see if it is creating the correct result. Oh, I didn't start it or deploy it, so yeah, this is going to be a problem. But check the video, we'll be sending out tomorrow, so you can see the full demo. So one of the questions we often get is, we have some different versions. Which one should I be selecting? And we have the free trial. You just go to the website, sign up for that. Then you can evaluate, you can create the assessment, you can overview the monitor, and then there's trial of the migrations for 30 days. Then we have the migration edition, which is the one that SAP is promoting, where you can use the tool for 1 year to test migrations. There's some limitations on it, that you can only take a message from PI and replay it in CPI for a period of time. And then you can also try all the other capabilities. Then we have the DevOps capability, which will enable you to, also to transport the integrations into your productive system, be able to create CPI test cases or integration flow test cases directly, monitor the integration, that's Git repository. So that is the governance part. And then we have also, if you want to use our tool for migration, it's €100 per ICO that you migrate. Do you have anything to that?
No, I was just looking into the questions right now.
Yep.
One of the things that I noticed, so the migration edition, that one you have access only if you have an integration suite license already running, right?
No, not there's no requirement for it.
Okay.
It's basically the trial, but we have added this that you have it for a year, and you need to provide a company name. We just need to approve you for these scenarios.
All right. Good. Okay. There was an interesting question from Bruno. He says, what should be the source or PO for my migrations, like the development system, the QA system, or the production system, right? So,
yeah.
What's your take? Because I have my take on it.
It really depends on your governance, what you have set up for these things. I prefer the production system, and at least also to fetch some of the test cases from, because transport from development or development to the new system is the way to go, because you can have some garbage that you have not transported, etc. And it is also the place where you're generating real data, not what you have in the old one.
Yeah, I would say that on terms of scope, definitely the production environment defines the scope of your migration.
Yeah,
right? And most probably for the time of migration that is test based, that should be the source for most of your objects itself. But we have to remember that it's a program, right? So throughout your migration, you will have changes, issues on your PO environment. So things that might require you to migrate a development or a QA environment to align within the projects. And I don't think that's a limitation on the tool, right? You have a different landscape from migrate to from, and the source, you can mix the sources, right? You can migrate from QA or production. So at least a tool determine what you have. I will always start with production and migrate from the other teams only if it is a better scenario for me for what this specific interface has. But I know a complementary question follow up to that, it will be like, so are you migrating to CPI production or to CPI development? And for that, I think there's only one answer, that is you migrate to development. Okay.
Yes. No doubt. Because yeah, you want the governance, you want to be able to test.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there is custom adaptation we have. I think we'll just need to hurry up. The license cost is based on the iCode that you migrate, and the DevOps is based on the number of iFlows or iCodes that you have or using the tool to use DevOps. So each time you activate it, it will count and use that value. Just so you know, we have on some more things. You can take action now. I think that is really a good idea for you to download the tool. You can learn Integration Suite pretty easily, or get a free tier trial edition and understand what it is. You can download the FIGAF tool, go to the FIGAF site, go to trial, or download the DevOps tool, the PI to CPI migration tool, install it, create the assessment, try to perform some migrations, try the testing, and try the transport. And then you can start going through this assessment to see, okay, so how much do we actually need to migrate here? I am also doing a course, and do we have a link for that, Michael? Next week, where I'll go through all the different steps to get started, set it up, plan the migration, and there's a pop-up here. Go in and sign up. I hope that you'll join, because then you have a little more idea about what we will go through, and then you will actually be able to see how to run these different things on your own system and understand what is a migration, what is a test case, how do we create it, run it, etc. So I hope you want to join that. You can also, if you want to have a call, no one for this one, I guess. You can go to the site and book a session. We can have a talk about your migration strategy, how the tool can help you, or if you have some specific questions that we did not get through today. I think that was all I wanted to share.
There's one interesting question as well from Jitesh. Jitesh has had a lot of good questions today.
Yes.
Is the migration the right approach, or rebuild the scenario with a SAP standard process? Yes, that's an interesting question. So migration is the right approach. I think that it's important to know what you obtain out of migration, right? Out of an automatic migration, you attain a product that is ready to use or ready to build upon, right? And that depends on the level of effort that you want to put on your governance and your system moving forward. There will be migration that is migrated, configured, correct to things, ready to use productive, and the results will be the same as your productive environment, right? There is migration also that after you migrate automatically, you will want to use it as baseline and then build on top of that, right? So you can but there will be also things in which you want to say, okay, this thing, I never like it how it runs to PO, or this is doing this in PO in this way just because it's in PO.
Yeah.
But if I would have had an orchestration environment from day one, I would have done it differently, right?
Yeah, this is the one where you use CCP PMs, or where you had this flow in and flow back again, these kind of scenarios. If you have other questions, just put them into the chat or in the QA section, and we'll try to cover those also. Yes. We'll stay a little longer to answer all of your questions.
But it's an interesting, you will face it, and you will have to design on the run. But I can tell you this, from modern architecture, there's two types of, I would say, big categorization of your interface. What I would call master data synchronization, master data distribution, and then there's transactional data. Transactional data, generally, SAP has not changed any processes in the transition from ECC to S4HANA. Maybe there's new APIs, maybe there's a new way to access them, but in terms of transactional data, how you will interact with on manufacturing process, logistics execution, finance process is extremely similar. So you will not see a need to change something necessarily. There's packages, standard packages, like for example, e-documents to Italy, Hungary, Mexico, that many people have built on PO. Then you might have a good an interest asset to actually use the standard packages from SAP instead of transition, right? But
Yeah.
in master data, I think then there's a really good architectural exercise to do to start with, because there's where you can actually enrich of an event-driven architecture or event for a very rich distribution. The way that you will do distribution of data in CPI is definitely very different than in SAP PO, right? If you're distributing your data into 65 different receivers, you might not want to have a flow with 65 different receivers inside. So you might want to start using queues and make a better scenario from it. If you have a MDM project running on the side, maybe this is the chance to actually gear in into your MDM project and leverage on the quality segment from that, right? So your master data distribution goes from MDM and not from SAP itself. So I would recommend that in master data distribution, definitely look into the architecture and do not plan or assume that you're gonna do a straightway migration one-to-one.
I think, yeah, obviously there's also other products. There's the one domain model and the new MDM solution from SAP. I guess that correspond to some of these different scenarios.
Yeah.
Again, event driven, and I guess that's also one of the things that I often get asked. So how do we push in the event driven into these flows and handle them in an efficient way? And obviously that is a, well, it's a different way of doing these things, but you need to take the cost benefit. Does it make sense or not? And I think that all depends on your future architecture, and what it can scale and how often you make changes to it. And yeah. Cool. Other questions? Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed it so far. It's been, yeah, some good questions. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Wang, for joining.
Thank you.
And yeah, if there's something I didn't cover or you want a more demo of these things, book a session. Check the video that we'll try to send out tomorrow as a part of the replay, where you get a fuller demo of what's going on. But I think it was important also to have the discussion. What makes sense? What is it that you can migrate? Yes, and there's the link to if you want to book a session. There's another question, maybe?
No.
Thanks. Okay, cool.
Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you for joining. Thank you.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Yeah, bye.